Learning from the inside out. Welcome to the School of Self-Worth Live, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sam Osbourne, the Self-Worth Guy. Today we are talking to Jason Mefford, who's a good friend of mine. He's down in Long Beach. Jason, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Jason, it's great to have you on a live stream. This is the first time I've interviewed someone on this StreamYard, so I hope.
Well, I feel very honored. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So today we're going to be talking about this idea that you want to share of learning from the inside out and something around that and leadership. But I want to start by just asking you to tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and who you serve.
Yep. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in corporate America. I was an executive responsible for, get this, really sexy things: internal audit, risk management, ethics, and compliance. Woo!
You did it for the fame and the glory.
I did it for the fame and the glory. That's right. Yeah. No, but they're very integral parts of organizations, things that people have to have. And I did that for many, many years. Left corporate America about 10 years ago to start my own company, and have actually a couple of different companies now. So mainly the people that I serve are a lot of corporate professionals. They're in some of those areas. So I have a large online training company. It's self-service kind of a thing. We call it on demand. So people can go out and get training anytime, anywhere, on any device. And it's about topics that help them do their job better. Right. So I've got that business, but I also, coach and teach executives as well on, how to become a better leader, how to become a lifelong learner. Because, it still surprises me in today's environment that so many people still don't get. You have to learn something new every day. You have to be improving yourself every day.
But that's because reading is boring.
I know. Well, see, that's the thing.
But fortunately, we have podcasts and we have endless amounts of video to watch. So there's really no excuse to not learn, or at least find something that you're interested in that's going to help your career, right?
Correct. Well, and that's why, I've written a few books myself. But, honestly, from the author standpoint, it takes a long time to write a book, right? It might take me 6 months to write a book, and you're going to read it in 2 days, right? But I can get on podcasts, right? Like I've got my own podcast, Jamming with Jason, as well. I can get on there. I can put blogs on my website. I can do videos and live streams like this. I can reach a lot more people and develop a lot more content quickly, right? So like you said, there's no excuse. There's plenty of books, but there's also, YouTube videos, podcasts, lives like this, blogs that you can go to.
Maybe it's not freedom of choice that we need, but freedom from it.
That's probably a good point.
Right? You go and stand in front of the drinks at the local store, and it's like bottled water, and there's like 10 different varieties, and it's like, which bottled water do I want? Without really understanding that they're all owned by the same company.
Most of them are, especially the chip aisle. Having worked in the food industry for a long time, 95% of the chips are made by the same company. Yeah. But it's it's interesting because you bring that up, because it's so much of the time, especially people that I work with, and I know this happens to a lot of people, they get stuck in their head and they're afraid that they're going to make a wrong choice. And so because of that, they try to overanalyze. And again, I told you my corporate background. So imagine trying to, talk to somebody who's a risk manager as a professional. They're like, whoop, off the deep end as far as trying to overanalyze everything and how am I going to mitigate all of my risk, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, just like you said, going in the aisle in the shopping center, it's like, just pick a bottle of water. If you don't already know what you like, just try something. And then if you find out you don't like it, then next time don't pick the same thing.
This is my approach to whiskey. in the aisle at Trader Joe's or Vons is just like, go, well, I really don't know anything about it. I suppose I'll start with A and just go through B, C, D, and over a few years I'll have tried them all, right? And I've actually found the ones that I like, and it's usually the cheap and nasty stuff.
Well, it's funny because I'm a whiskey guy too, right? And it's like, I've got some bottles that are probably $200, right?
Yeah.
And I've got others that are $20, and it's the same thing. It's whenever I do I'll do like little whiskey tastings, at my place. So you might have to come over sometime. We'll do one. But
okay.
But it's funny, I put the stuff out, and it's more about what do you like, right? It's not about what everybody else thinks is valuable, right? Because you might sip on the $200 bottle and think this is nasty, right? And something that's $20 or $30, man, you really like that. Well, go with what you like, right? Test stuff out, try it out.
So how does this relate?
You can always make a different decision.
Yeah. How does this relate to learning, in your opinion? And this idea of, you gotta learn in 2021 if you want to advance.
You do, and it's there's a lot to the learning, but actually, this example of whiskey is a good one, okay? Because you can read a book, you can even watch a video. Learning, that's knowledge, okay? You can gain all kinds of knowledge. You can be very knowledgeable and have learned absolutely nothing. Okay. And again, this is something shocking for people. It's like, what do you mean? I've read 3,000 books. What do you mean? I haven't learned it. Well, it's because learning actually comes either in the reflection and application of what you've learned to your own life, or through experience, actually practicing it, doing it, right? So again, it's like when you were looking at the whiskey, it's like, well, which one do I enjoy the most? I don't know. You're going to have to try different ones. You can read up on it. You can see what people say about it, because I'll do that. And it's like, oh, that one sounds kind of good. Next time I go to Total Wine, I'm going to pick up that, right? And then I try it. Well, do I like it or not? Until I experience it, I'm not going to know. But the quicker you can make those decisions and find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, right? The more decisions you make, even when you're wrong, the faster you're going to learn.
And I think it comes down to people are afraid to try different types of learning. They're afraid to try to read a book or watch something or learn something. There's a fear around the effort or the risk that it might be a waste of their time. And I've found that, there's going to be things that, aren't they're not your tastes, or you go, that was a waste of my time. So I found that learning has a lot to do with not only finding what you want to learn so that it's valuable, but being able to determine if something is going to be of value, and if it isn't, to be okay with saying, all right, get rid of it. We don't need to waste any more time on that.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because you're not going to know until you try. But so many people, like you said, they're afraid that they're going to make they're going to make a wrong decision. They're going to make a mistake. Oh my gosh, I can't do that. Well, you're never going to know until you actually try. Right.
And there's the fear of missing out on something else, which
while
you
you're
could
engaged.
be doing instead of learning.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, I guess, the backstory of people didn't like school. And so this idea of learning is like, why would I did that in school. I've done all the learning I need to do. Why would I need to keep doing it? Except for if maybe a job requires it of me. And there is a kind of reputation about training that it's boring. We're only here because the boss wants us to do it.
Well, and that's funny because actually it's, I deal a lot with the subconscious, and exactly what you're saying is exactly why so many people actually push back and repel the learning, right? I mean, it's like you're in the Pink Floyd song, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, right? Where it's like, if you've experienced education in that way, then of course it's like, that's not very fun.
No.
To have the nuns whacking your knuckles with the ruler or whatever it is, right?
You must learn.
You must learn, and you're a stupid child because you got an F on that, or whatever it is, right? But all of those experiences that we actually have, they get programmed in you subconsciously. And so, yeah, if you're somebody who is resisting learning more, there's probably some subconscious block. You're going back to being 8 years old again, and Mrs. Polk in third grade is telling you, how
you are there again.
Yeah, you're there again, right? And it's like, and sometimes it's so silly, right? So it actually wasn't Mrs. Polk, but this would have been first grade. I can't remember my first grade teacher's name, but we had a coloring sheet, right? So they give us a picture, we've got to color it, right? And so I did the exercise. It was a picture of a sheep. Okay, so we get an outline of a sheep. So I colored the head black, and it was on white paper. So I didn't color in the fur area, right? Because it was already white.
Right.
And so I got my paper back, and I got like a C.
Not
and I'm
complete.
like, yeah, I'm like, what do you mean? And that was her point. It's not complete. Where I looked at it and I'm like, well, it's already white. Why do I have to put a white crayon over it? Right. I saw the world different than my teacher did. And learning, especially as an adult, it's not about the grade. Right. I mean, that was one of the things that was so freeing for me when I got my master's. Bachelor's degree, when you go through and do that, you got to get good marks so you can get the good job.
Play the game.
Yeah, and in the profession that I was in, they looked at GPA. The top students out of the accounting department got the good paying jobs. So I had to make sure grades were important for me then. Masters, it doesn't matter. Everybody gets a B or an A because they already know that at that level you're smart, right? And so you don't have to worry about the grade. And learning is totally different when you're not worried about the grade. Mm-hmm. It's also a lot different when you're not worried about the outcome. And this goes back to what you were talking about before with, I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a mistake. You're not getting graded in life. You're just getting feedback. And if you don't like it, then you make a different decision going forward, right? It's not like you're getting an F on your report card because you picked the wrong whiskey.
Yeah. Also want to talk about or ask you, about the cost of learning, and is it worth it for the bottom line? So what can you say about, why should I learn unless it's going to affect the bottom line? How would you deal with someone who says, what's the importance of learning unless it does that?
Well, there's the tangible and there's the intangible side to it. Right. And so again, since I teach or train a lot of people in corporate America, they're looking at it from their career perspective. Sometimes people will look at it from the dollars and cents. And again, it's usually a good investment. Now, what do I mean is investing in yourself and investing in your career leads to higher earnings in the future. Okay. And sometimes significantly higher earnings. So again, it depends on the quality. You've got to look at kind of what it is, what's going to actually help you. But investing time and money in yourself is usually your highest payback return. Mm-hmm. So if I were to take $2,000, let's say, and invest in my career, get some new skills, learn something else, that $2,000 that I'm investing is going to turn into $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 worth of future salary that I'm going to earn
down the track,
right?
Yeah.
So it's an investment in yourself, but it's going to return a lot higher return to you than if you put it in the stock market or if you buy crypto, right? But that's what a lot of people will be like. They're like, well, I'm going to put $2,000 in crypto because I'm going to be a millionaire. Well, no, you're not. You're going to make some money over the long term, but are you better to put it in that, or are you better to invest it in yourself? And I personally think in yourself. Now, I'm evidence of that. I have, between my college education, the books, the courses, the coaching programs that I've gone through, I have easily spent $500,000 in my education, cash cost, right? And some people might be like, whoa, $500,000. What are you talking about? Well, that's returned me millions of dollars in my life, earning potential. So investing that money does have a financial payoff, right? So that's kind of the one side of it that you can look at. But are there other intangibles to learning? Oh, yeah, right? Because, again, I mean, if you've gone to parties or other places and you're talking to people, right? There's some people that are very boring to talk to because they're very
don't say that about people.
They're very one or two dimensional because they don't know or they don't understand. They
haven't found the love of learning.
Right. And so, if you think about the people that you enjoy talking to or you enjoy being around, chances are they're people who are open-minded. They're people who are curious. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I use the term lifelong learning. You want to always be curious and learn new things. So again, I'm a bit nerdish, but if we look at something like my wife and I watch a lot of movies. That's our entertainment in the evening usually.
Yeah.
And
what are you watching at the moment?
Well, last night we actually watched Mother's Day. Okay. It was a movie, but again, it's a Gary Marshall movie. It's like Valentine's Day and a lot of those that he did. It's kind of a romantic comedy, kind of funny, sort of thing. But I'm not watching that. So here's an example of how to learn, even while you're doing things like watching movies, right? So I'm watching the movie, and again, because I'm a media guy, I'm looking at things like the camera angles and the lighting and the quality, and analyzing and breaking it down. I'm doing that from the nerdy perspective, but I'm also looking at the storyline, right? And I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm trying to think, how can I apply this to my life, right? What is it about the story that is going on that I can learn that's going to make my life better, right? And, this is all off the cuff, right? So here it's alive.
Yeah.
But I was trying to think of a specific example from that movie, because there were different characters, right? Like one of the characters, she was divorced mom, her ex-husband just got remarried. So now there's a new woman in the mix, and it's Mother's Day, right? So now the kids are like, well, is Tina our mother too? No, she's not. But yes, so you're looking at
the dynamics of relationships and how they change, and then you start connect that to your own relationships, and also how you can teach others about relationships and use this as an example. So you're geeking out on that level.
Exactly.
I do the same with Hannibal.
Oh, do you? Would you like some farmer beans with that?
I could cook that, and I could mix it up with
some fava beans. It'd be lovely. No, but it's your world totally changes when you start being curious and when you start learning from everything around you. Because like you said, even something as relatively banal as watching a movie, if you look at the interactions or the relationships in there, and it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe I needed to learn that, because if I do this thing a little bit differently in my relationship, it's going to make my relationship better, right? Or, what is that story telling me at a deeper level? And this is another thing. I mean, for people that know, like Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and other stuff like that, all stories have levels of meaning as well, right? And so again, you can take something like, he was actually one of the inspirations, Spielberg said, for Spielberg coming up with the Star Wars movies, right? And him
got it on right now.
Oh, you got it on right there. We go. I didn't even see it below the thing, right? but it was one of those where Star Wars is many levels, right? So you can watch it as just a movie, as just entertainment, and it's fun. It's great. I love it. I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
You can also watch it again, and you're going to get some different meanings out of it. you're going to hear certain lines in the movie that are going to mean something different to you because you're in a different phase of your life.
Here's my favorite line from the first one that came out in 1977, right?
77. Yep. 77.
Obi-Wan Kenobi is on the Millennium Falcon with Luke, and Ben Kenobi's teaching Luke how to use the lightsaber with that floating ball,
Yep.
which shoots lasers out, and then he gives him the shield, the helmet that's got the shield, and Luke's complaining, saying, how am I going to be able to defend myself if I can't see? And Obi-Wan has this great line. He says, "Let go your conscious self and act on instinct."
Mhm.
And I always remember that for if I'm speaking in front of people, if I'm teaching, or if I'm learning something. I try to let go of trying to control it or my hang-ups or these sorts of things and go with instinct. I think instinct is something that people don't really learn about, especially when it comes to their own instincts. It's an incredible power, and it's almost like automatic motivation. It's down in the brain here. You can bring up ideas of the animal brain, but instinct is like the force in the way that you have a greater awareness. And if you can tap into that while you're learning, I think it truly opens up a wider world, which is what Obi-Wan says to Luke. When Luke says, "I want to learn the ways of the force," he says, you've entered into a wider world or something like that. Yeah. Which is true.
Well, and that's where the inside out comes into what I'm talking about.
Yeah, let's talk more about that.
It's teaching people how to get inside, right? Because a lot of times, again, we try to change everything in our outer world, but our outer world will constantly change. And until we change on the inside, then our environment around us never changes for the long term. And so again, what that means is, there's lots of examples. There's people who win the lottery. Oh, and now I'm rich. Well, inside, they still feel like they're a poor person. Yeah. And so what happens a couple of years later, they're a poor person again, right?
Or in more debt.
Or in more debt than they were, yeah.
They didn't realize they had to pay some tax out of it.
Yep, exactly. And so, but if you're only trying to change your external world, it really doesn't change your world around you. Or if it does, it's very short-term in nature. But if you can change your inside, right? If you can get away from overthinking, if you can learn how to do that, if you can learn how to be a different person, right? Because the doing is only as good as the being doing the doing. Two people doing the same exact act will get very different results. And it's not the doing that makes the difference. It's the person who they are as they are doing the doing.
Let's go into that. Let's go into how do you break that down into some tangible everyday exercise that someone can do? What's an activity that a beginner could do to start to change who they are, to become someone who loves learning, who has a method of going in? What would you say to that?
So there's a lot of different tools that I use to help people do that, because effectively what you're doing is you're reprogramming your subconscious brain. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You've probably heard of affirmations, right? Well, affirmations are a way of reprogramming your inside. And again, you might look at it and think it's complete bullshit to begin with. I don't believe this. It doesn't matter. If you tell it to yourself enough, your subconscious brain will believe it.
I think it was, who played the Godfather?
Not
the original one. The one who came second. Not De Niro.
Oh, the second one, because you're not talking about Brando.
Who played Scarface? Who was that guy again?
Al Pacino.
Yeah. So I heard he, in preparation for the role, would walk around saying an affirmation, "It all belongs to me."
Yep.
It all belongs to me. And he just said that, and he started to believe it. Like, if you want to be the role of the Godfather and have that power, that's a good affirmation to just say, "It all belongs to me. Everything belongs to me." And even when he wasn't on set,
Yep.
and in preparation. So yeah, I think that doing that can start to change
So
the way you see things.
it does, and that's just a simple example, but acting is a great way of explaining that, because just like you said, what Pacino did there, the really, really good actors, they get into character. They become the character. And so they're doing things like affirmations. There's other, self-hypnosis, meditations, other tools as well. And part of it is as well how you're doing it. Because if you just say it and you don't believe it, there's other little tricks that I teach people on how to actually make it stick as well, right? But it's, if we go back to our Star Wars example, right? I mean, you brought up the scene in the Millennium Falcon. And at that point, again, Luke didn't get it. He hadn't internalized it yet, right? And we get to the end of the movie, and it's the climax, right? He's on the Death Star, and he goes through the first run, and they drop the bomb, and it misses because he's again trying to do everything from the external. He's putting on the the little guide meter, whatever it's called, on his helmet, and trying to line it up that way, like he's been taught to do, right, as a pilot. And he misses. And again, he kind of has that, oh man, kind of a feel. And then what does he hear? He hears the voice of Ben Kenobi, the inner voice coming through from Ben saying, trust the Force, right? Or use, I think it was use the Force.
Yeah.
Luke, use the Force.
Which has a touch of throw caution to the wind in it, just a little bit. Well, I like to think of that, a stronger version of saying throw caution to the wind is to improvise or to trust your own ability to be in the moment and come through with the goods.
Yep. And that's what he did, right?
Yeah.
He flipped it off. He went back to what he had learned on the Millennium Falcon, and he effectively just trusted and let his own being come from the inside out, and he knew exactly what he needed to do.
It's like an old Western where they teach them to shoot from the hip, and just feel it rather than to aim, and so I like that American country sort of mentality of, just shoot from the hip and feel it.
Fire, aim, ready instead of ready, aim, fire, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's there's actually some science behind this too. And again, most people don't realize this, but we think we are so evolved as human beings because we've got this prefrontal cortex that separates us from the rest of the...
Seems to make us feel in control.
Seems to make us feel like we're in control. But here's the reality, right? That prefrontal cortex that we're so proud of calculates at 40 bits per second, 40 bits per second, right? So you can use your prefrontal cortex, you can get into thinking, but 40 bits is pretty slow, especially when your subconscious brain processes at 11 million bits per second. So would you rather, be the equivalent of using like an old Commodore 64 computer?
Exactly.
Which is your prefrontal cortex, or are you willing to actually tap into the mega computer that's actually inside you already? You just have to learn how to tap into that and how to use it. Because the things will come through exactly when you need them to. It came through exactly when he needed to drop that bomb.
I want to ask you a question about a technique or something you would instruct people to do. Here's just quickly the one that I would do. I've said to myself, and it's affirmation or self-talk, I'll just say, all right, unconscious mind, unconscious brain, I'm going to trust you. Here's the goal. I want to be able to throw the ball, the beanbag in the cornhole at the end of the bar, right? So I can win the game. And I'm just going to kind of let go. I'm going to kind of aim a little bit, but I'm going to trust that you can control the central nervous system and whatever motor functions need to happen. But I've never gotten really that good at it, at cornhole especially. But I'm saying the approach to communicate with your unconscious and say, I'm kind of handing over the reins. That's worked in some regards, especially for me when it's like doing something new. You kind of go, well, here's my end goal. If we get there in a zigzag way, that's fine. So what is a way that you would recommend for people to communicate with their subconscious?
Yeah. So one, especially because we'll kind of pick up that cornhole example, right? Is there are ways, and again, this is where visualization kind of comes in. Okay. And so I'll just kind of walk you through how to actually do this. So next time you're going to win at cornhole, right?
Yeah,
So
beautiful.
make sure you up your bet with the guys at the
Friday
bar.
night, right?
Friday night. Okay. So you got a couple days, right, to do. But again, just like affirmations don't seem like they're doing anything, or you might not believe them, when done with repetition, with intent, and in using what I call multisensory, which means you're not just hearing it, you're using your other senses as well. And so this is why visualization in particular can be so powerful. And again, you might not realize it, but professional athletes, Olympians, all of these people do
One of the
this.
most researched
It's one of the most researched areas too.
areas,
Right?
visualization and athletes and affirmations.
Yep,
Self-talk.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as an example, right? So they did one study where it was shooting free throws. I want to say, if I remember right. And they just took 3 groups of random people, right? Standards scientific study. Control group, they do nothing. The 2 other groups. The one group, so what they did was they brought them in, they had them all shoot free throws.
Yeah.
And see how many they could make
On the basketball court.
before the study on the basketball court. And so they recorded how many people did before they went through this exercise. Then they took the control group. They said, go home, come back in a week or whatever it was. We're going to shoot baskets again for you. The other 2 groups, they took the one group and they said, okay, we want you to go on the basketball court for an hour a day or something like that. Physically shoot the free throws for an hour a day. Okay. So they did that. They came back, got recorded again. The last group, they said, we want you to think about, sit in a comfortable position, relax, close your eyes, imagine yourself shooting those free throws. So they've got those 3 groups, right? And what did they find? The people who actually did the visualization actually did better than the people who physically shot the baskets. Now, why is that the case? Because when you're physically doing it, you see when you miss, right? And so every time you miss, there's a little part of you like, oh, I didn't get it, right? The people that are using the visualization, they're visualizing themselves making it every single time, right? And so it's reinforcing subconsciously. Then they get up afterwards, they do kind of what you were saying, they just kind of let go and trust that I know what I'm going to do, right? And it doesn't always work out, right? I remember Michael Jordan, since we're talking basketball, saying everybody always focuses on the games that I shot the game-winning basket to win the game. They forget about all of the last-minute shots that I didn't make, right? But again, it doesn't matter. You've got to go through that practice. You've got to do that. But that's just a simple way of how you can actually do this. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of ways to do it that you can learn.
I mean, if you think about it, the heart is beating by itself. The brain is firing by itself. My hair is growing, and I can have a lot of it. Maybe I'll have for a while. My old man's still got his hair, so I'm in luck. But yeah, our body is doing so many things, digesting. I don't wake up and go, all right, stomach, digest. We have all this automatic processes that is incredible. It's harmony. It's beautiful. It's art. It's a miracle. And I believe if we can tap into that somehow and trust that instinct, the joyful learning goes up.
It does.
If you mean I have power, I think that's a real key, is learning. The realization that learning gives you power makes it exciting. Go, oh, and freedom. Like, so I could create my whole life.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the joy.
It is, because you're actually creating it, and you're creating it the way you want to, right? You're the creator, right? So instead of, being a victim and living in circumstance, there are ways to get inside. right?
Now let's talk about setbacks, and let's talk about the fact that it does take some time to be successful. It's not always overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you what can you say about dealing with setbacks and failures and making mistakes? What's your view on that?
Well, it's one of the things that I've started to do, because especially as an overachiever, right? Like most of us are. Yep. Here we go. Power to us, right? Is we tend to be very hard on ourselves and do a lot of negative self-talk when we don't do something. Now, what we've just been talking about is kind of positive, right? Reinforcing and putting positive things in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Every time that you're hard on yourself, you're also programming your subconscious.
Mm.
And so that's why, again, a lot of times, with the setbacks, we start going down into this spiral because we don't know what to do. We start, yelling at ourselves or talking to ourselves negatively. And before we know it, we're just like down in despair and, oh, my life sucks, kind of thing. And so part of the learning too is, like you said, you've got the power. You can move around within there, right? So one thing, and again, that a lot of people will talk about, especially when they're using the word mindful, they usually will say without attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And to a lot of people, it's like, what the hell? What does that actually mean? Without attachment? Well, here's a couple of phrases that I say to myself when something doesn't go the way I want it to. Oh, isn't that interesting? Being interested, being curious is not being judgmental. So it's not having
It breaks the
attachment.
negative as well.
It breaks the negative. So, next time something happens that wasn't the way you wanted it to be, oh, isn't that interesting? Or
But
laugh,
a lot of people won't.
about it.
A lot of people they cannot say that because they're so invested in getting it right the first time, and to say, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" might come across like a self-sarcasm. Like people might go, "Oh, well, isn't that interesting?" But I know the intention behind what you're trying to say is you should say, "No, it's okay. What is the feedback here?"
That was the other one I was going to say, is I use the word feedback a lot now, right? Oh, thanks for your feedback, right? Instead of thanks for your opinion or whatever, thanks for the feedback. And then again, this is where that lifelong learning comes in. Is it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just feedback to help you make your next decision, right? So don't place any judgment on it, right? It's there's going to be lots of times that it's not going to work. It's just like Michael Jordan, but you miss 100% of the shot. Wayne Gretzky, I think, said this, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So,
it's a good reframe.
Yeah. So it's, again, it's like, well, you can choose to just sit there and wallow in whatever you're wallowing in, or you can get up and take some action. You can try something. I'll guarantee you you're probably not going to get it right the first time, but it's okay, right? The first time, when you learn to tie your shoes, did you do it right the first time? Probably not.
You ballsed it up for weeks on end.
Yeah. Right. But then you learn some things, right? Like, the bunny going around the tree and down the hole, right? So you learn things that help make it easier for you to do it. So that's really what I help people do, right? Is help them learn things like, oh, I can use, the bunny is going to help me to remember how to tie my shoes, right?
So would you say learning is actually learning tools, or learning tools to learn?
Yep.
That can certainly help. What about people's exaggerated views or their expectations about how long it should take to learn, and getting frustrated with, well, why isn't it happening? And what can you say about people who have got, fantasy in their head of, that success should come quicker?
Be patient. Be patient. Okay. And so again, I'll quote some scientific stuff here. A lot of people think if they do something one time, I'm good, right? I do it once, I should know how to do it. Well, that's just not how we work, right? So literally, again, if you're trying to do some things to reprogram your subconscious brain, there's some numbers that you need to be aware of. One is the number 10. Okay. Whenever you do something or say something different than you're used to or that you've been programmed to do, your subconscious will ignore you for at least 10 times. Why? Because again, it's trying to keep you safe. And so if you say something different that's not what it's used to, its job is to ignore you, and it will ignore you. So if you say an affirmation once or twice, it's going to ignore you. So that's why the number 10 is important, because if you're going to be doing some of these things, you want to repeat at least 10 times, because at the 10th time, it's like, oh, hold it. Jason's saying something different. Maybe I should listen. Okay. So that's where the number 10 comes in as being important. Now, there's a lot of misinformation out there about habits as well, right? Because again, part of what I'm helping people do is create new habits that serve them better, right? Because we're habit-based mammals, okay? And a lot of people say, oh, 21 times, new habit. Nope, sorry, that's not what the scientific research says. The number is 67.
Okay.
Okay, so you've usually got to do something 67 times before it actually starts to become ingrained as a habit.
Like you don't have to think to remember it,
right?
To do it.
You're just doing it, right? And so this is why, for transformation especially, you've got to think in, 30, 60, 90 days is usually a good time frame. Why 90 days? Well, if you do something consistently for 90 days, you're past that 67 mark. So if it's something that you're trying to do every day, stick with it for 3 months. You stick with it for 3 months, it's probably going to be ingrained, right?
And you'll get better at it.
And you'll get better as you go along, right? I mean, Michael Jordan didn't start out being Michael Jordan, who he is, right? He spent a lot of time on the court. He was committed to showing up and going to practice every time, every day, right? I think he showed up and left. He showed up earlier and left later than anybody else on the team. And he was superstar. Why? Because he showed up earlier and he stayed later. That's how he stayed that way too.
A very controversial approach to success.
Yeah.
It's come early and leave last. Very controversial.
But it goes back to that point. So again, you can play with those numbers as well, right? So one of the things that I teach people is with affirmations is I call it the 10 by 3. So what does that mean? Well, in 3 minutes a day, you can start to reprogram your life. How do you do that? You say these affirmations with feeling 10 times in a row, 3 times a day.
Language plus feeling. Would you add a visualization as well?
If you can, or if you try to imagine or try to visualize what it is, right? Or what it would be like in that outcome, but it has to be future state as well.
Now I want to throw in an objection, which I know I sometimes have towards people who believe in this law of attraction idea that you can just visualize something and the check will arrive in your mail. I'm going to ask you how you would say that saying the language, having the visual works, and sort of, what can you recommend to the people who think that they can just say it and visualize it and it will show up? You know what I mean?
Yep, I do. Because that is a very common misconception. You still have to do the work.
Yeah.
Right. Because again, if the way that you're being, and again, so since we've been talking about Michael Jordan, the commitment, right? A way of being is to be committed, as an example, right? So he was committed to being the best basketball player he could be, right? And some people might argue he's been the best or greatest basketball player of all time. I don't know. That's up for debate, right? If you want to debate it. But was there any doubt about his commitment? No. So I can tell you he was doing visualizations. He was doing some of these other things. He was envisioning himself making that game-winning basket. But he wasn't just sitting on his couch eating bonbons and Cheetos, right? He was getting his butt up and getting to the gym, getting to the court, and actually doing the practice too. Because we have to see ourselves in that future state, but we also have to do the work to get us there. And like you said, that's what a lot of people forget when they're trying to just visualize and just do law of attraction, like what a lot of people teach. You still have to do the doing.
Yeah.
But being a different person doing the doing will help you manifest those things.
Now, in addition to that, I want to ask you about self-worth and the subconscious, because that's the topic that I love talking about. And so I'm interested to hear what you have to think about how self-worth has to do with programming the mind and, let's say, achievement and accomplishment.
Yeah.
And why people perhaps with less self-worth don't carry through.
Yeah, it's the underlying, and again, those of you that are listening, whether you believe me or not, don't believe me, but this is really one of the root causes of everything that is out there, right? So listen to Sam. He knows what he's talking about, right? But it's self-worth is one of those things that you can reprogram as well, right? And again, we've talked a little bit about some of the negative self-talk. I mean, honestly, if you spent 20 years telling yourself that you're a piece of shit, it's going to take you some time to get out of that old story, right? There's ways to do it. There's the tools to do it. It's not going to take you 20 years to do. It can be much quicker, right? But one of the ways of being is loving, right? So you can be loving. You can do acts in a loving way. And what ends up happening is so much of the time we forget to do that for ourselves. And so what will happen is we'll beat up on ourselves, which makes us feel horrible about ourselves. And until you change that on the inside, again, there's my inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that people need the most help with is self-love. Until you become more loving to yourself, until you do things or don't do things that are loving to yourself, you're not going to believe it. Now, the doing still has to go along with it, right? And so a lot of times in doing that, when people are working on self-love, it's as simple as just telling yourself you love yourself every day. There's a whole book about that, right? I think Love Yourself Like the World Depends on It. And there's some exercises in there, but one of them that's very simple is that affirmation of I love myself, that you're saying to yourself again, multiple times over multiple times a day. That by itself, you do that for 30 days, you're going to feel a difference. But you can't just do it 1 or 2 days and just kind of go off, right? But that is really one of the root things that we all have to get to. And it's not arrogance. It's not, but if you don't actually have that self-worth, then you're not going to trust yourself either. And if you don't trust yourself, then you're lying to yourself. And so you're
defeating yourself before you even begin.
Before you even start.
There's Canadian clinical psychologist, Dr. Jordan Peterson, quite popular on the internet at the moment. And he's got a book out. And one of the rules, it's called 12 Rules for Life, a really good book. And one of the rules, he says, is to treat yourself like someone you care for. Mm-hmm. And I don't think many people care for themselves like it's somebody else. And a lot of the time we will treat other people better than ourselves because maybe we don't feel like we deserve it, maybe because of the story. And I think just contemplating this idea of I'm going to take care of myself like I was another person can help someone to get around that block of I'm not worth caring for. It's like, well, just play with the idea for a moment, and that's like a kind of a starter motor in a car, you know, it's a reframe in as well.
Yeah, because you've got to change your story. It is a reframe, right? You have to reframe the stories and the beliefs that you have developed. So again, if you spent years, on self-abuse effectively, right, by talking negatively to yourself, and where it really stuck to me, because a lot of times people will ask, well, how do I do that? And it's like, well, first off, start with your self-talk. We know the chatter that goes on in our head, right? We know what's there, and sometimes it's pretty dark, right?
Would you recommend people just write that stuff down, like for a few minutes a day, just write down the thoughts that come into your head and then go, wow, I'm telling myself that.
Yeah.
It's a good
journaling is a great way to kind of get it out. Especially if you're just like overthinking and you just can't do it, just sit down, pick up an old pen and paper. Don't just type, because there's actually, your brain will process it differently.
Yeah.
You're actually,
I believe that.
moving it. But that's one of the ways to try to get it out there. But then ask yourself, would you say that to someone you loved? People are like, well, what do you mean? Well, do you have a partner? Do you have a child? Think of someone that you love. Would you talk that way to them? And if the answer is no, then it's time to start.
That's called learning.
Feeding stuff in there. That's learning, right? And you got to
awareness
learn.
Is called learning. Like, shit, am I doing that to myself? So I think a lot of learning is the realization of what you were doing habitually. So that gets self-awareness.
It's the awareness, because we don't realize we're doing it until we become aware.
And I think it is those little realizations of how we've been sabotaging ourselves that spark the interest to learn more. Whoa, where else am I doing this in my life? And then comes so if I can become aware of those things, can I change them? Can I install positive things? And generally, yeah, but I think that gets over it creates the curiosity to become aware of how you are sabotaging yourself.
Yeah, because there is a lot of self-sabotage, much more than we realize. And again, this goes back to some of the habit stuff too. If you've been spending years doing this to yourself, just be patient. The first couple of times you try to do this differently, you're probably going to revert back to your old habit, right? And again, there's some different ways to try to break old habits, some little hacks to it, but you've got to replace that old thing with something new, right? Because if you don't replace the old thing, then
you go back to it.
The old thing hangs around, right?
It's kind of like there's a vacuum, or the brain abhors a vacuum, much like nature abhors a vacuum. I think that's one of the laws of science. So yeah, this got to replace with something better or something else.
Yep. And then you've just got to be consistent, right? You've got to be consistent long enough to get past those numbers that I was talking about before, the 10 and the 67. But again, just be patient. It's like anything else that we learn, right? Don't beat yourself up while we're in the learning process. One of the people I know, she said, think of yourself like a newborn baby, right? And you wouldn't scold a newborn baby. You would be, nurturing and loving for that newborn baby. So just think of yourself as a newborn baby that's learning and growing and developing. And how exciting is that, right?
But don't be a helicopter parent.
No helicopter parents. No helicopter parents.
That's going too far.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, Jason, we're going to wrap it up. This has been a great conversation. I want to, can you tell the people listening where they can find out more about you? Have you got a book? Have you got programs? What if they want to book you for speaking? Tell us, what's the way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get me is, you can find me on my website, jasonmefford.com, right? That's a very easy way to find me. There's usually links to everything else from that standpoint. I do have lots of blogs out there. There's videos, links to videos. I'm on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm pretty much on everything, so you can find me pretty easily that way. And yeah, I do have coaching programs and other courses. I mean, if you're more technical on certain stuff, there's one place I'd send you, but other people I'd send you somewhere else. So feel free to reach out to me on social media that way, or through the website. There's a contact form, and I can kind of point you in the right direction. That's also the easiest way. Again, if you want me to speak, I don't put millions of miles on my body like I used to. I literally used to travel about 200,000 to 300,000 miles a year, literally all over the world. So now I mainly do it like this, virtually.
Yep.
For a lot of different reasons, but same thing. If you want me to speak, then reach out and we can talk about it.
Beautiful. And just leave one message with the audience regarding learning from the inside out, something they can take away from today.
Just make learning fun, right? I mean, I know at the top of this, we were talking about how so much of the time I think we get programmed into hating school or learning, because most of us didn't really enjoy our school. The school and the educational systems it's a pretty piss poor way of trying to teach and have people learn anyway. But just let that go and let learning be fun, because it's amazing and it just opens up. You see the world in such a different way when you become curious, when you're actually trying to learn and grow and develop yourself every day. I mean, that's why I learn something every single day. That's part of what I do. And it's
like which whiskey you like and which one you don't.
Well, it could be whiskey. It could be something I learned from the movie. It could be, listening to a podcast. But every single day I am doing literally probably 1 to 2 hours of development on myself in one way or another, learning something or
Beautiful.
working on something that I can apply.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Jason. It's been bloody awesome talking to you.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to end the broadcast here. Everybody, I hope you got some great value out of this. Make sure you check out jasonmefford.com. All right, have a great day.